Okay, here we go for chapter 13, video 2. Continuing on talking about biomass. Biomass are things like your wood, charcoal, and manure. By the way, charcoal is just burnt wood. Usually your biomass, those type of very natural biomasses are used to heat homes, to cook food throughout the world in usually low socioeconomic areas, poverty, or not really poverty, but very rural, undeveloped countries. A lot of Africa, Asia, that kind of thing. But you can still find that in other areas as well. Here in the United States, it's now considered kind of cool to go cook with wood and charcoal in your backyard on a barbecue because it's kind of getting back to your roots. So, good old barbecue. Then you have ethanol and biodiesel. These are biofuels. They are coming from soybeans and corn. We use them to create these fuels that then can be used in cars. All gasoline now has up to 10% ethanol in it. You'll see that at the gas pump when you fill your car up or pump the gas. It depends on the price of gas. If the price of gas is high, they'll cut it with ethanol, but a lot of times ethanol right now is more expensive, especially since our gas prices are down. So there's probably very little ethanol, if any, in our gasoline right now. You can go up north and you can find a gasoline called E85. It's 85% ethanol and only 15% gasoline. The only thing about ethanol, it kind of burns gummier. It needs a residue, so your car has to be a flex fuel car in order to handle that. We don't sell a lot of flex fuel cars down here because we don't have ethanol E85. But if you go up north, you'll see it. And actually, every once in a while around campus and stuff, I do see a car that has the little thing on the back and it says flex fuel. It will say flex fuel on the car if it can handle it. Biodiesel, same kind of thing. It's created from soy. I think soy is biodiesel, soy beans. It's a biodiesel. Little different and stuff, but again, the car has to be able to run on biodiesel to do this. Think of biodiesel in some ways, or ethanol and stuff, like oil, like your cooking oil. And actually, there are cars around that people have modified to run on like cooking oil. They'll go get all the old oil from, McDonald's and stuff, and they tool around town using it as a gasoline, and it's pretty funny because they kind of smell like French fries. So those are your biomass fuels. So here's a picture of charcoal being sold, but this is unfortunately a consequence of biomass a lot of times in your biofuels. We're tearing down the forest, especially in several of your very low poverty countries. It's cheap to go cut down a tree. I can go cut down a tree and then I can cook for my family or I can sell it for money. And that is what's happening. And they've lost a lot of forest that way. Okay, so how do you produce energy from biomass? Well, you take the plant material and either you burn it directly, like with wood, or you have to put it through a process to make your biofuels and make your liquid biofuels. Ultimately, you either are burning it or you can burn it to create electricity, or you are converting it to a liquid substance or a gas to be used. So there you go. Those are different things you can do. Okay. Again, one of the problems with this is that people are using it because it's cheap. It's not a bad thing, especially when you're talking about like burning, cow dung, cow patties. Not a problem kind of thing. But when you're tearing down the forest to do it, it can be quite scary. Okay, some advantages, disadvantages. Of course, there's a pretty large supply. It advantages, there's no net CO2 because it's the modern carbon. You're not introducing any fossil carbon. So the carbon that you're releasing due to burning it is not as big a deal, or really no deal at all compared to burning fossil fuels. It's moderate cost. You can grow more kind of thing. It's very easy and handy. It's pretty much everywhere, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we are not using it as a sustainable method, which means then it becomes into the non-renewable kind of realm. So you have to be able to use it at a rate at which you can also regrow it. If you're using it faster than that, that can be a problem. Some of them are not the most efficient fuels, especially when you're talking about the biofuels, ethanol and biodiesel. A lot of energy goes in to making those, so if the energy in is equal to the energy coming out, then why'd you do it in the first place? You know, it's like if you spend $10 to make dinner and then turn around and sell it for $10, well, why didn't you just keep your $10 in the first place? You know, there's no benefit in that. You have to have a net increase in the amount of energy coming out compared to what you're putting in. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. And sometimes that is a concern with biofuels. Okay, converting plants and plant waste to biofuels. So our motor vehicles can run on ethanol, biodiesel, and methanol. And they are produced from plants and plant waste. Major advantages, of course, the crops can always be grown. Most of these crops can be grown anywhere. In Switch, the movie we were watching, they had sorghum. Sorghum is a great source. It kind of looks like a corn, but there is no corn ears on it. It's a good source of cellulose for biofuel, and it grows really, really rapidly and very high and stuff. It was like 18 feet when he was growing it there. And that's only after a few months. It grows very rapidly. There's no net increase in CO2 emissions because, again, you're talking modern carbon, not fossil carbon, so it's not a big deal. And it's pretty available, and it's easy to store. Liquid energies are very easy to store and transport, which is always a benefit. Producing ethanol, again, switchgrass is another way we can do it. When you're growing it, it removes CO2 to the atmosphere and helps store it in the soil and stuff, so that's a good thing for climate change. Other crops you can use, sugar cane, corn, switchgrass, your sorghum, those kind of things, they can all be used. And we can use also a lot of agricultural waste. We don't need to just grow the plant. Well, we grow the corn, harvest the corn, but then go ahead and take the corn stalks and use them and convert them to ethanol. You don't have to necessarily use the corn. So that's a good idea. So ethanol is ethyl alcohol. It's made from sugarcane, potatoes, manioc, and corn. It's 10 to 23% pure ethanol, which makes gasohol. Gasohol is E10, 10% to 23% ethanol, which is higher than our gasoline, because our gasoline has to be less than 10. Or you can get up to the E85s, which is 85% ethanol, which are for your flex fuel cars. We process a lot of corn here in the United States to make ethanol, and that's a problem because it competes with our food source. Do we want to use the corn for food for people, or do we want to use it for gasoline? So that's an easy, always an ethical issue and a kind of a disadvantage of it. And actually the competition of it drives up our food prices. So biodiesel is made from combining alcohol with vegetable oil, made from a variety of plants such as soybeans. Okay, so some advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, it's high octane fuel. There's quite a bit of energy in it. It's, reduced CO2 emissions because, yes, it's producing CO2, but that's modern CO2 versus the fossil carbon coming off the fossil fuels you were or are burning in your car. Pretty good energy, reduces, again, CO2 and carbon monoxide. Doesn't produce that as much because it burns more completely. It can be sold as a gasohol, so a combination. And it's potentially renewable depending at the rate we use it. Its disadvantages, sometimes because it's not as high in energy as your fossil fuels, you need a bigger gas tank in your car. If you use it in your normal car, you might not be able to drive as far because you're not going to get as many miles per gallon kind of thing because of the lower energy. It limits our corn supply. It competes with our food crops kind of thing. So do you grow it for ethanol or for food, that kind of thing? So that will drive up food prices. There's high nitrogen oxide emissions. It can be corrosive, and it can be hard to start in cold weather because the oil gets kind of thick, like putting oil in the fridge. Nothing. Biodiesel, again, similar advantages, disadvantages. Make sure you read through them and you're comfortable with them. If you have any questions, let me know, but I'm not going to walk through them. You can read them. Biodiesel and methanol. Again, we grow crops. If these prices for these crops go up, we're going to see more deforestation because we'll take more forest down to make more money off these kind of things. The CO2 is not as bad of a deal because it's being sucked up for the photosynthesis, and even if it's re-released, it's the modern carbon, so it's not a big deal. Yeah. Okay. So again, advantages and disadvantages of methanol. As long as you know the generic biofuel ones, you're fine, because they're all pretty much the same. Hydroelectric. Moving on to hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is dams. Here we go. There's your dam. What happens in a hydroelectric is we build a dam. Dams have a high initial cost. They're very costly to build, but once they're built, they're pretty self-sufficient, and you only use minor maintenance after that. What happens, we build the dam, the water gets stored behind it. This used to be a river, now it's going to be a lake or a reservoir. We call it a reservoir of water. We can use this water for all kinds of things. That's another reason we often build dams, is not just for power, but also to create a reservoir, especially in areas where water is an issue. What happens is we have an intake here, and we can control the intake. There's multiple turbines up and down the length of the dam, and we can only run the ones we need. So if it's night and we only need a little energy, we only run a few turbines, and we lessen the water kind of going through. If we need more, we can open them all up and run all the turbines. What happens is the water just comes by here. The water movement through the dam turns the turbine. Turbine shaft comes up, turns the generator. Generator makes electricity. Off your electricity goes to wherever it needs to go. Again, one of the biggest problems with electricity, it's very easy to generate, and dams are very efficient, although they do horrible ecological damage, is these transmission lines are not very efficient. We lose a lot of electricity along the way, but we've got to come up with a better way. Okay, so there's two types, or several types of hydroelectric. There's what we call a run-of-a-river system. If you've ever seen, the old mill movies, and they have the mill next to the river, and there's the wheel that turns as the water goes by, that's a run of the river. We used to use them to grind wheat and that kind of thing. But you can use it for electricity. The only problem is as your river flow changes through the seasons, because of course your river flow is usually a lot less in the winter and fall, and when the snowpack is forming, and then when it melts in the spring and summer, then your river is much larger and has more flow. So you're going to have lots of energy during the spring and summer, but not so much during the fall and winter. So that's not a good thing for a consistent supply of energy. But it's doable. Water impoundment is a dam. Dams provide lots of energy. You can open and control them, control the flow and how much energy you're getting off of them, but they do a lot of environmental damage, of course. And then we have tidal. Tidal is a new thing, putting turbines in the ocean in areas where the water is moving, usually due to tidal flow. So as the tides are coming in and out every day, and it's a constant movement of water either in and out kind of thing. If you have a place where the tidal flow is restricted, so the water really has to move fast, such as the entrance to the Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. Is a very narrow area that the water has to go in and out. Moves very rapidly. Dropping turbines in there, they will spin continuously and make great amount of energy. There's also a plan to throw some turbines, 3 large turbines, out into the Gulf Stream off our coast. That Gulf Stream moves 9 miles per hour all the time. They actually suspect that if we put 3 turbines out there, that we could actually generate about half the electricity that the state of Florida requires. That's pretty cool. So hopefully they'll get that underway soon, because that would be pretty nice. So hydroelectric, depending on how it does, it could have damage to animals. Of course, we could be there. Definitely in a dam, when you put up the dam, you're flooding a huge area behind it. You should be aware of the Three Gorges Dam. In the Three Gorges Dam, they displaced over 1 million people as they basically flooded the hills and valleys behind the dam with the reservoir. And literally, whole entire villages are underwater. And they built the people a horrible apartment complex and expected them to move there. It was just horrible. You have no CO2 emissions. Really, there's no per se. Air pollution, water pollution, that's a little doubtful because you can get a lot of sediment buildup behind the dam.